Dancing on the edge, I ignored my friend's warning and drank myself to the brink of suicidal thoughts. Nothing as good could ever come again, I convinced myself while spiraling. Now I'm learning to let go of friendships that no longer serve me. Will I ever hear from Elsa again? Content warnings, mental health, suicidal thoughts. This post will likely be a bit longer. As you can see, I changed all the names and I sincerely hope no one I know will read this. However, I feel compelled to share my thoughts and get them off my chest. A few years ago, I was not in a good mental state. My last relationship took a toll on me, and I frequently felt lonely, especially since my circle of friends primarily consisted of couples. Additionally, I was mildly depressed. I did not see my friends as often as I used to because we had moved apart after university, making it harder to organize group activities. It was during this time that a friend introduced her best friend to our group. I will call her Elsa. From the moment I met her, I thought she was very cool and I made an effort to get to know her better. She was motivated and we quickly became good friends. At this point, I was already experiencing intense feelings for her, but I tried to convince myself not to pursue them. I believed she would not be interested in a romantic relationship, and our developing friendship was immensely valuable to me. We met at least once a week and shared everything, leading us to become extremely emotionally dependent on each other. We cuddled, spent weekends on the couch, went on vacations together, the whole 9 yards. We engaged in many activities typical of a romantic relationship. We consistently provided each other with reassurance to alleviate our insecurities, and I believed we were beneficial for each other's well-being. She complimented me on an emotional level. Those are still the most meaningful words anyone has ever said to me. She meant everything to me, and soon the fear of losing her began to overwhelm me. My life felt like an unending low when we were apart and an exhilarating high when we reunited. I essentially neglected all my other friends. At this point, I had been in therapy for a while, ironically since meeting Elsa, because I sensed that something was amiss. My therapist helped me gradually understand my feelings and recognize the unhealthy aspects of my situation, eventually leading me to discuss my concerns with Elsa. I wanted to be honest with her, regardless of the consequences. Unsurprisingly, she subsequently established new boundaries. No more cuddling, no more vacations together, and no more sleepovers, all reasonable points. Naturally, I was heartbroken. I missed her reassurance and felt that we had suddenly distanced ourselves emotionally. I could not comprehend how I developed feelings for her while she did not feel the same in our relationship. After all, it is not something we can control. She often stated that, if necessary, she could be distant as a way to protect our friendship, but I struggled to cope with that. After discussing things with her at length, I kept my distance, which she agreed was a wise choice. Being around her simply stirred too much emotional turmoil. Naturally, my depression worsened during this period. I started taking medication, frequently isolating myself for days or weeks, and not responding to friends for extended lengths of time. You know how it goes. I found it difficult to attend social events with the group because there was always a chance Elsa would be there. During this time, my friends continuously reminded me that distancing myself was a healthy choice, that circumstances would change, and that it was better to miss a few birthdays if it meant improving my mental health. What I truly needed to hear was that my absence was regrettable, that people missed me at those events, something along those lines, even just once. I honestly never felt missed. I have no idea if this was merely the way things were, or if they did not want to apply any pressure, but I suspect the latter. Gradually, I convinced myself that life was meaningless without her. It seemed reasonable to me because I believed such goodness could never occur again, and I felt I had reached the pinnacle of my existence. During this time, I had a significant falling out with a friend, whom I will call John, who happened to be the boyfriend of Elsa's best friend, whom I will call Anne. This led to even more distance from the entire friend group. At first, he did not disclose what was bothering him. I only discovered the details much later. I later found out that the group avoided conflict, and he felt I often fixated on one person, leaving them behind once I moved on to someone else. It is partially true. I frequently invested considerable time into someone when I attempted to deepen the friendship. However, I would realize at some point that it was not working out the way I had hoped and would stop pouring all my energy into that single relationship. I understand how this might have affected others. Today, I recognize how problematic that behavior was for me and for them. I never felt like I was important to them. The only instance in which I felt valued was with Elsa. He also mentioned that my actions negatively affected the friendship between Anne and Elsa, and that was where I lost him. It was during that period that I truly felt suicidal. I even devised a plan because a colleague from work invited me to a shooting range, and I thought to myself that it would be a good opportunity to end everything. I was attending a friend's wedding at the time and, of course, encountered Elsa. I recall driving home at 150 kilometers per hour in heavy rain on a country road, thinking that if something were to happen, then so be it. I had a friend with whom I discussed these feelings extensively. I will refer to her as Diana. She is incredibly empathetic, and I felt she was one of the few individuals who could somewhat understand what I was going through. However, she was also under significant pressure herself at the time and eventually asked me to talk to someone else about the issue for a while. I appreciated her honesty and thought it was a considerate request. However, I did not want to be a burden again, so I did exactly that, distanced myself. We later attended a live-action role-playing event at which Elsa was also present. I got completely drunk every night trying to escape from everything. I have not consumed alcohol since then because my suicidal thoughts intensified whenever I was intoxicated. Interestingly, I met a wonderful friend at that event, and she is someone I am closer to today. But at that moment, it represented the absolute lowest point of my life. During that time, I connected with someone new through a dating application, which I was primarily using to meet new people and to leave the house. I will call her Luna. We developed a friendship, and she was a genuinely cool person. It was such a relief to have someone from outside of all the turmoil. Since my suicidal thoughts did not improve, I eventually found myself in a clinic for 8 weeks. There, I received a diagnosis of a mild form of borderline personality disorder. It made sense. The clinic helped because it removed me from my daily life, and I frequently visited Luna, who lived near the facility. She was an incredible friend and played a significant role in my recovery. From that point on, things gradually began to get better. As part of my healing journey, I obtained my motorcycle license, something I originally wanted to do with Elsa. To this day, few things can clear my mind as effectively as riding my bike. I genuinely believe this experience partially saved my life. I absolutely did not want to spend New Year's Eve in my home country because it was when I first met Elsa. Therefore, I traveled to Spain with Luna. I formed a new, adventurous circle of friends through a colleague people who align with me well. I began dating Luna, even though I initially struggled not to devalue my feelings since it was not the same unhealthy limerence and obsession I had previously experienced. We eventually broke up due to differing visions for the future, but it was the healthiest relationship and breakup I have ever experienced. Gradually, I distanced myself more and more from my old circle of friends. We primarily only engaged in tabletop role-playing games together. Eventually, a friend named Jimmy shared his concerns about my behavior. He acknowledged the impact of my depression, but he also indicated that I owed many people, including his girlfriend Diana, an apology. In his view and/or hers, I only reached out to her during difficult times and seemed to forget about her when I felt better. I struggled to explain to him that things never improved significantly and that I simply did not want to be a burden anymore. He also said that the others had learned to cope without me during that time and that it would be perfectly acceptable for me to remain distant. This hit me quite hard. He was also somewhat hurt by the situation at the role-playing event when he looked after me while intoxicated. He claimed I ignored his advice to stay away from alcohol and Elsa. That revelation broke me. The event he referenced was at a point in my life when I was convinced I would not survive until the next New Year's Eve, and he was upset that I had not immediately heeded his advice in that moment. It also devastated me to hear what he said about the friend group, prompting me to emotionally detach from them further. Birthday wishes became non-existent, contact dwindled, and I began quietly exiting group chats. Another friend ultimately removed me from a long-standing group, partly due to all of this and also because of the complaint that I made scheduling very difficult. He told me that things had become so complicated that no one could navigate them and he needed some distance. I understand at least partially. I often felt like a burden, and in some ways I certainly was. It is incredibly challenging to support someone dealing with depression, especially when traits of borderline personality disorder influence their social interactions. That said, I have always been bothered that he could not acknowledge that he had difficulty navigating the situation himself. Instead, it felt like he generalized everything to avoid taking personal responsibility. Honestly, I do not believe there is any shame in admitting that you cannot handle a person anymore. This entire situation affected me deeply. And honestly, I truly miss the character I used to play. She felt like a part of me, a part I cannot quite seem to reach in real life, and now she is gone. I sent a message to Elsa about 2 or 3 times over the years to check if we were both interested in rebuilding our friendship, but I have not heard from her in over a year. Although I no longer desire to restore that friendship, I often wonder if she would ever reach out again. It has been over 2 years since we began to distance ourselves. I still feel melancholic when I think of her today, but I now allow those thoughts to pass without becoming trapped in my mind. I recognize that I made many mistakes. Reading through this, I see how significantly I contributed to losing my friends. For a while, I attempted to make amends with them, but eventually came to accept that we simply do not fit together anymore. I grew weary of constantly apologizing and clarifying myself, and I no longer wish to invest my energy into it. I had a hard break with some friends, like the one who kicked me out, but for the most part, we simply did not reach out to each other just as I stopped reaching out. I can manage my feelings well now, but they still frustrate me from time to time. They are wonderful individuals, and I sincerely wish them the best for their futures. Today, I am in a much better place. I have many great friends whom I truly appreciate, and I feel that I have grown significantly since this whole ordeal began in 2022. Story 2. Trapped in a loveless marriage, I realized I'm not invisible, as my husband's cruelty shattered my spirit. After years of enduring abuse, I made the painful choice to leave only to discover I had no support. Now I rebuild alone. Can I truly be free? Hi everyone. I do not really have anyone in my life to whom I can open up, so I am writing this here, hoping someone will read it and perhaps understand. This is a piece of my story, raw, personal, and painful. I am not seeking pity, just maybe some advice, a kind word, or even just to feel as though I am not invisible. My story is not a fairy tale. It is real life. Sometimes everything that appears bright and true collapses in a single moment. Putting yourself back together feels like assembling shattered glass. You cut yourself, you cry, but you keep moving forward. We have now been together for 4 years. We have two beautiful children, my son who is 5 years old and our daughter who is almost 1. My son is from another man, a man who never saw him, who for us is as if he is no longer alive. However, my husband accepted him as his own. Before our daughter was born, he was a caring father to my son, and we both wanted a little girl. I believed our family was real, but he shattered my trust even before I discovered I was pregnant. Everything crashed down in one day. I found photos on his phone, pictures of my friends. The things he did with them made me feel as if I could not breathe. The ground vanished beneath me, and then the test showed 2 lines. I was pregnant with his child. I chose to keep the baby. I chose to forgive. I convinced myself it was a mistake, that he realized what he had done, that it would not happen again. But it did. Throughout all 9 months of my pregnancy, he continued to do the same things. I tried to remain for the children, for the family. He promised to change, to fix everything. I held on. When our daughter was 1 month old, I left. I could not take it anymore. I chose not to suffer in silence. I chose myself. However, I could not last long alone with the kids. No job, no place to live, 2 children, alone. I could not cope. I returned not out of love but out of fear, out of desperation. This is part of my truth. It is not perfect. It is not easy, but it is mine. When I returned, he was physically present, but in reality, I was still alone. Inside me, I clung to the memory of the man who once made me feel safe. I tried to forget, to erase what he did, to wash his cruelty from my heart, but time, it is a stubborn force. It fades even the brightest emotions when they are not reciprocated. I grew accustomed to it. I stayed trapped by circumstance. I no longer felt anything for him. He was still at work most of the time, but even when he was home, I felt like a stranger. His flirtation with a coworker, he brushed it off with jokes. She is unattractive. I do not want anything from her. But I remembered. He had said similar things about my friends. Then I found their photos on his phone. I could not trust a single word anymore. Day by day, I drifted further away. His touch repulsed me. It was physically unpleasant when he touched my hand or tried to kiss me. It was no longer about love. It was about surviving in a house where I slept next to the man who had destroyed me. But it went even deeper, even darker. During my pregnancy, he hit me, pulled my hair, punched my face, grabbed me violently, and choked me. In those moments, I did not feel human. I was a target, a living shield, and no one knew what I was experiencing in that home. In my eyes, he ceased to be a man. He became a monster, someone who destroyed me mentally and physically, someone who crushed everything good we ever had. And the most bitter part, after all of this, we baptized our daughter and even got married in church. We stood in white under the crown, as if trying to piece together a shattered cup, as if giving meaning to something that had already lost its soul. The wedding day seemed to start well. People smiled and wished us happiness. I stood at the altar in white with tears in my eyes. Everyone asked why I was crying. I said, from happiness. But it was not joy on my face. It was grief, the kind I had long learned to hide behind a half-smile. After the church, we went to meet the guests. Everything felt festive except for one thing: his mother. She has always meddled in everything, even in the kitchen, checking if everything met her standards. When they cut the cake, she snatched the knife from the waiters, saying, "This is how you do it, not like that." And my husband remained silent. As always, you could not say a word about her, not even the slightest criticism. Her word was law, even when she humiliated others. This is the same woman who, a week earlier, kicked us out of the apartment she had supposedly gifted us. We lived there while she and my father-in-law stayed in their house. Then she decided to move in with us for a month. She came home drunk and tracked dirt all over the clean floor. I could not allow someone like that near my children. When she sobered up the next day, she texted my husband, "Get out of my apartment." The reason: our child had touched one of her figurines from the cabinet. We did not even notice at first. He had simply opened a box, looked at it, and put it back just in a different order. He did not break or damage anything, just a child's curiosity. Yes, I understand those were her personal belongings, but for goodness sake he did not ruin anything. And another reason I did not mop the floor, but I had, she just walked on it drunk in dirty shoes. We had to move in with my parents into a tiny two-room apartment where my sister also lived with her child. We squeezed in however we could. My parents even slept on the floor just so the kids could have a bed. My parents, they were the ones who truly showed care. They bought us an old apartment without renovations. We started from scratch, slowly, step by step. Then my father-in-law promised to help us and my parents with funds for repairs, but during that time, not a single cent. We went into debt just to ensure our children had a place to sleep. Yes, I understand, no one owes us anything, but then why promise? Back to the baptism evening. I carried our daughter in my arms all night. Almost no one helped except my mother. My husband, smoking, sitting with his parents, I felt invisible. He danced with everyone except me. We never even had a real wedding. This was my only chance to feel needed, loved, but he did not even come near, did not hold my hand, did not ask me to dance. That night I knew for sure, I am alone. With my children in my arms, pain in my heart, within a family that felt more like a silent scream than a home. I chose to endure, not because I forgave him, but because I needed time to get back on my feet, to find strength, to build at least some stability for myself and my children. We got our own home, old, full of debt, needing repairs, but it was ours. Behind those walls I felt a little freedom, that this space was mine, ours. I felt nothing for him anymore, and he sensed it. Only then did he begin to change, acting like a husband and pretending to care. But I knew it was a facade. Inside, he was still the same man. He sensed I might leave, and those changes were not love. They were fear of losing control. Occasionally, he still exhibited the same cruelty, still raised his hand against me. Eventually, I started to suffocate next to him. It felt like being trapped in a cage with no light or air. Everything became unbearable, his control, suspicions, phone checks, interrogations. Where were you? With whom? Why did you not answer? I could not endure it any longer. I proposed an open relationship, but with a clear boundary, no physical intimacy. For me, it meant a chance to breathe, to simply be myself, to have coffee with someone, to talk, to feel like a human again, not someone's possession. We were both tired. I desired peace, even if only on the surface. He silently agreed. He understood I was at the breaking point. But until my marital status changed officially, I never crossed that line. Not because he deserved it, but because I respected myself. That is when I met someone else. Let's call him K. We just talked. He knew I had a family, knew I was struggling. He never pressured me. He was just there. A random accident brought us closer. He crashed into my car. Technically, it was my fault. However, he, like a true man, took responsibility and paid for the repairs. And something shifted. We began to talk more, laugh, and share. For the first time in a long while, I felt heard and respected. He became my safe harbor, not a lover, a friend. I did not see a man I wanted to be with. I saw a shoulder I could lean on. His calmness, his willingness to listen, it was everything I had been missing. He did not merely see a mother, he saw a woman, a person. He helped me, helped my mother. He was there when it mattered most. He was like a life raft. Now about my parents, I finally gathered the courage to tell them everything. With tears and trembling hands, I revealed what my husband had done, how he hit me, how he humiliated me, how he destroyed me. And they said, endure, this is your choice. You had children with him, so live with him. My parents always said they would not let anyone hurt me, that they would always be on my side. But when the pain became real, they turned away. My father said, I was a fool in my youth too, but I changed, and so will he. They did not want to hear my truth. They wanted us to reconcile, to pretend nothing happened, to move on as if it were all a dream. My father even threatened my husband. If you touch her again, I swear, but those threats meant nothing. They did not stop him. And then I knew I had no support from anyone, anywhere. I was completely alone. But even in that silence and loneliness, I began building my strength. Not in spite of it, but because of everything I endured. To be continued. Story 3. Labeled a failure at 35, I scream inside, I'll never amount to anything. My family's burdens crush me while I long for acceptance in my self-made cage. Despair feels like home, but can I rise from this darkness to find a sliver of hope? I consider myself a failure. I believe I will never amount to anything. Although I am already older, I do not have a proper job, a real career, a future plan, or a relationship. I lack aspirations and hope. I have resigned myself to a meager fate and existence which I genuinely think I deserve. I do not consider myself smart, hardworking, motivated, or interesting. I am mean, bossy, aggressive, irresponsible, and difficult to deal with. I want things done for me, and I want to engage in activities that are easy and simple. I am lazy and rarely care about anything except my own self-interests. It has always been about me. I never reflect on what has happened to me that could uplift me or what I could do to change and improve myself. Of course not, I am a coward. I loathe being perceived, I despise being looked at or asked questions, and I cannot stand being in a leadership role. I desire to live in the shadows, yet I have this aching longing for acceptance from someone begging, hungry, desperate, crawling in the darkness and on the ground. I yearn for someone to accept me in all the parts of me that do not work so that I can accept myself. I cannot function alone, I am too sad and too lonely. I need someone to lean on, someone I can cry on to tend to my wounds with me. I will never become the person I want to be. It is easier to succumb to despair. It is more comfortable to lie in bed all day, dissociating from my feelings, engaging in activities like writing this self-pitying, pathetic letter. Believe it. It takes power, strength, resilience, discipline, and self-love to prove that one can be better than their current state. It requires the decision that the difficult, grueling, achingly painful process of self-improvement is worth it one day for oneself. It is hard to believe that I am even deserving of peace or happiness. I feel as if this suffering is my punishment for being the unattractive person I am. I feel so weak, so alone. I feel fundamentally broken, unlovable, and unloving. I want to destroy others, ensuring that they remain destroyed to prove that my existence in their soul is forever. I wish for them to look only at me. I want them to think solely of me. They must never let me go, they cannot let me go. I want them to cry and scream and break for me. I wish for them to burn for me. I want them to prove that I am worth and deserving of the greatest anguish they have felt, because to be without me in their thoughts is even more painful. To me, that is my warped definition of loyalty. I desperately want someone to take me away from here. I yearn for commitment but fear abandonment, so I treat people as disposable. I seek servitude. It is easier to cope with people leaving me when I deem it casual. If it hurts me, that merely proves that I am real and here, that I am still human. And in its sick way, that feels good. I have nobody as destructive and self-sabotaging as I am has people who want to remain around. I desire to hurt others because hurting is so powerful to me. Beneath all this anger and hatred for myself lies a part of me that can still cry, something that can feel, and I am not entirely a beast. Driving people away and hearing them say goodbye only affirms my belief that I cannot be accepted for the fiery hell that I am. This pain I carry is too large, and yet it is all I possess, the only thing that has been able to stay with me. I damage people and things and my life, only to retreat into my vast carelessness and apathy until I shift to my next fixation. I have hurt many good people in this manner. I am selfish and greedy. I do not care what sacrifices others have made for me in the past. I yearn for freedom and peace, yet I know I will always live like a slave, hand to mouth. I resent my family, I resent the position I have been placed in, working like a dog and never allowed to take for myself. I do not care if they fell into poverty, but if they do, so do I. Then my own life is threatened, and I do not want that. I do not work much. I do not even work hard. Yet every moment of every day, I bear the mental burden of knowing that none of the money I make is mine and that I can never stop working, lest debt and poverty pursue me. All the bills, groceries, and cost of living, all me. Forever. I would trample others if not for the fear of retaliation or the knowledge of my actions coming to light. The only thing I do daily is try to dissociate and engage in other meaningless, futile activities to forget that I must live as myself. I want to run away. However, I have no money to my name, no resources, and no one. My life is comfortable. I do not have to pay rent, which is something I frankly never want to do, and is the primary reason I would never do something foolish like run away. I have never experienced the pain of housing insecurity, and I can only imagine the horrible, excruciating anxiety that accompanies never knowing if the roof over your head will suddenly vanish. I am grateful that this place I reside in is secure, but it still feels like a cage. A cage binding me to my family for decades to come, preventing me from moving or growing. I am losing more and more of myself to maintain the household. All these fleeting possessions I have acquired and all the food I have bought do nothing to alleviate my loneliness. They do not lessen my feelings of entrapment. It is not enough. I am not enough. I remain silent because they do not deserve my vitriol, and they have sacrificed so much more for me to even be complaining from this position. I am spoiled and privileged to have the space to feel these things. I do not respect my father at all, a terrible and horrible thing to admit. His displays of violence, poor emotional intellect, absence, and irrational and extreme behaviors have made him someone I despise. I hate him for the person he is, yet I also love him for the father he was and tries to be. I know deep inside he is also starved for connection, suffering from severe wartime trauma, loneliness, and pain. He has witnessed true atrocities of a terrible time in history. Atrocities that my first world struggles do not hold a candle to. Yet I cannot help but loathe the person he has become for the sake of survival. Like two lost dogs waiting to die, I hate that I see his behaviors and beliefs that directly conflict with mine, many of mine stemming from my refusal to become someone who lives like him. He is kind, giving, a good person, and generous to a fault. Still, I resent him. How messed up is it that to envision a life where I possess remnants of peace and independence involves the death of my parents? But to ever get there, I must care for them for decades, alone, hoping to maintain the current roof over my head. I do not want to be chained like this. Yet I am a bum, broke, and unsuccessful, leaving me with no choice. I want to die but do not wish to take my own life. I am too cowardly, too afraid of the pain or some disastrous failure that leaves me in a worse state than I am now. Is the idea of having absolutely no active consciousness as the person I am now, even though physically I am severely disabled, more appealing? No, certainly not. However, the thought of an instant, painless, unprocessable vaporization of the self is a comforting thought. I despise myself. I resent what I have had to do to survive until this point. I hate who I have become just to drag myself through each day barely existing. I understand everything there is to know about myself, why I am the way I am, why I have these thoughts, and why I have these beliefs about myself. I comprehend everything that has shaped me into this being. I have condemned myself to an existence that crashes against me daily like a violent wave, pulling me under each day. I know that life is worth living. It is worth enduring all this agony I am in, worth weathering all the trauma and fear I hold within this vessel. I am tired, I am battered, I am on the edge the same way I have been for the past 10 years unchanging, but somewhere inside I desperately seek proof that it is worth it. I keep crawling, my true inner self, crawling and crawling in the darkness, all alone, hoping to find a light at the end of the tunnel one day. But I am lost and hopeless, and with low prospects, I will never succeed. The parts of my family that have succeeded have completely become independent, retaining all their money for themselves while leaving me with the responsibility to cover what remains. They are building their own lives, unshackled by the obligations forced upon me. I agreed to this situation out of necessity to survive, but I did not anticipate that I would have to live like this forever. I no longer wish to continue living like this. I am falling apart from within, growing increasingly resentful and hateful than I already am. I want to hurt these people who will never understand what I have endured to keep food on the table and the lights on. I pay for the things they should be contributing to, merely so they can continue to build their nest egg, their future, on the back of my loss. But if I confront them, they will only respond with physical violence. They will never be bound by the obligations I will endure. They are not expected to care for the household the way I know I will be expected to in a few short years. But I do not want that. I have never wanted to. I long to run away and be free alone. I am filled with so much anger, hatred, bitterness, loneliness, anxiety, grief, fear, humiliation, shame, entitlement, selfishness, apathy, and sadism that it consumes me every day. I am so alone. I am just another loser. I will never be able to be the functional ideal of being a person with a place in society. I deserve this miserable fate. I will live and die like a dog just as I should. Story 4. My mom called me an unwanted bastard, and my brother is spiraling into chaos, while I finally met my secret family with a dad who abandoned us for years. Now my half-siblings offer the love I've longed for, but can I really cut ties with the past? Throwaway account. I originally wanted to post this in the relationship advice forum instead, but the story turned out to be quite lengthy and I am mostly venting. My life has been rather confusing, and I have never told anyone the entire story in chronological order, so this is somewhat therapeutic for me. I grew up with only my mother and my older brother. I would see my father once every few months, but my mother always said he did not live with us because he worked abroad. As I grew up, I began to discover that he actually lived in the same city and even had his own house here, and he did not stay abroad for that long. My parents were just constantly arguing and did not want to live together. My mother always worked late and we were not very stable financially. She and my brother would often fight as they both had terrible anger issues. We always had to share a room, and I would sometimes return from kindergarten to find all my belongings and favorite toys scattered on the floor, some broken and the wallpaper defaced with the word bitch painted all over it. It was difficult, and at times my father would take my brother to his house to escape the mess. I always tried to help my brother, even though he pushed me away. I always hoped he would finally play with me or at least accept me. One day, I asked to go with him because my mother had screamed at me too. When we arrived at his place, I saw a rather luxurious two-floor apartment. My father introduced me to other children, most of whom were much older than us, and their mother. There was a lot of tension and awkwardness between us, as though I had intruded on someone else's family, a significant foreshadowing, although my father claimed we were all one big family now. Their mother cooked for us, took us for walks, and my father read me bedtime stories. I was shocked by how normal this family appeared, something I had only ever seen on television. The children remained distant and I did not get to know them well. Everything felt confusing. So my father had another family, oh okay. The following day, my mother called my father and begged in tears for me to come home, promising that she would never mistreat us again. I loved my mother very much and always felt responsible for her happiness, so I agreed, but my brother continued to stay with our father for extended periods. I somewhat forgot about the whole situation and did not pay much attention to it. However, I kept hearing from my mother about how my father loved his other children much more and did not care for us at all. He did not pay her alimony, did not buy us nice gifts, and never came to my school or to any of my piano performances and so forth. Again, I did not pay much attention to it anyway. One day, when she was yelling at me again, she called me an unwanted bastard. She claimed that formally, my father did not even exist and that I had been born illegally, blaming me for all her problems in life. I was always alone, I did not have any friends. By the age of 7, all my bubbly and loud personality had vanished, and I came across as a peculiar shy child at school. I was terrified to speak to people and would burst into tears upon hearing loud noises or seeing bright lights. Since my mother did not have time to care for us, I grew up with her brother. He did everything a parent should have done, cooked, cleaned, played dolls with me, and accompanied me to parks. And unlike my mother, he never forgot to pick me up from school until 9 p.m. However, he struggled with a serious alcohol problem and would sometimes try to attack us with a knife, a drill, or an axe when intoxicated. He passed away from a heart attack when I was 12, leaving me with a strange numb feeling inside, as if it were my fault that I could not save him. My relationship with my father improved when I became a teenager. Deep down, I always harbored resentment because I felt like he had abandoned me in this hell. I started to believe my mother when she said he preferred his other children. I was bitter that their lives were normal while mine was not. He decided to reunite me with those children when I was 16. He adopted me back, as I discovered that my mother had put a random man's name on my birth certificate instead of my father's. To spite him and to give me her last name, I assumed that was possible back then in my country. I moved abroad to attend a school in Europe where my half-siblings were all enrolled in universities. I began to converse with them more and we all grew closer. I have been suffering from major depression since I was 13, and I observed that their mental health was consistently stable, which was unimaginable for me. Again, their family seemed mostly normal. Their mother never threw a television out the window when they expressed their opinions, and their uncle never pulled a "here's Johnny" on them, as happened to me. This was when I finally began to piece the story together. As you may have already noticed, my father never left their family to be with us. We were the secret family all along, and I was the product of an affair. My parents were in a civil marriage and divorced when I was born. One of my half-siblings is younger than my brother, so he had two families simultaneously. Their mother even shares the same birthday and a similar name as my mother. I have no idea how or why he managed that. Did he think, "I love my wife so much I wish I could clone her"? I also learned over the years that my maternal grandmother was an even worse version of my mother, which explains why she raised a daughter just as abusive and two alcoholic sons. I never met my grandfather, as he passed away almost exactly on the day I was born, but I always heard from my mother that he was a saint. It turns out he was also an alcoholic, just like my uncles, and would beat his wife and children. My brother dropped out of college, began drinking heavily and partying frequently. He does not have a job and struggles to find and maintain a healthy relationship. He often makes me very uncomfortable with inappropriate sexual comments. I must admit, I developed anger issues at 15 as well, and I know how to push buttons. I can say some very hurtful things sometimes, but only if someone hurts me deeply first. However, he overreacts to whatever I or my mother say, keeps punching walls, plays the victim, and throws tantrums like he did 20 years ago. My mother has improved, but only because she experienced a sort of religious psychosis while I was abroad, and she keeps joining literal cults and pyramid schemes as a coping mechanism, which is why she suddenly appears so peaceful and kind on the surface, although she still throws crazy tantrums from time to time. I am exhausted by all of this. I do not want to interact with my mother or my brother. My grandmother is suffering from serious health issues right now, but I do not even want to talk to her. As a child, I tried to help everyone. I attempted to parent my own mother, believing I could and must fix everyone. I see that no matter what, this side of the family is just like that. Even if they go to therapy, they continue to consciously make bad choices. I want my future children to know my real family because I do not want their voices and stories to be forgotten someday. But I also simply want to settle in Europe with my wonderful and kind half-siblings, my father and my boyfriend. I feel embarrassed when people in real life learn about my family, as I fear they will judge me too. I do not know what to do, whether I should try bringing my mother and brother into therapy and mending our relationship. It is not as if I haven't been trying for the past 20 years. I apologize for this lengthy venting post. I hope maybe someone will read it and share their thoughts or even offer advice if possible.